3 counties, 24 cities, working together, accomplishing more than any of us could alone. Whether your roots run generations deep, or you recently moved to Greater Portland, you are a part of Metro, the nation's only regional government elected by the people. Planning for the future, preserving what we love. Let's keep our region thriving for decades to come.
I'm Micah Reese, and I'm the Dive Safety Officer here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here is diver safety. I'm out here at the Oregon Zoo, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of this building. In the event of fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside the entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
All right, we'll declare quorum and call the Metro Council business meeting to order. I will now ask our clerk, Georgia Langer, to call the roll for attendance.
Councillor Nolan is present. Councillor Simpson.
Good morning, Georgia. Present.
Good morning. Councillor Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councillor Gonzalez should be here shortly, and Acting Council President Wong.
Present, thank you. All right, let's move on to public communication. We'll open up public communications on non-agenda items. Georgia, could you please describe to the audience our procedures that we will use for public communications?
Yes. If you are testifying on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. If you are testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by using the raise hand function in the reactions or more menus, or by dialing *9. When it is your turn to testify, I'll call on your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist, and you can turn on your camera if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the timer begins when you begin speaking. If you are testifying in person, there are timers located on the testimony table, on the wall, and on the digital screen. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. If you are testifying on an agenda item, which is not happening right now, and you have not signed up in advance, please fill out a blue card and bring it up to me before the agenda item, or raise your virtual hand at the beginning of the agenda item that you wish to testify on. But currently we are taking non-agenda item testimony. And Acting Council President Wong, I'm not seeing any hands raised in the audience for non-agenda item testimony. So.
Okay, we'll close public testimony and move on to resolutions. Councilors, today we begin with consideration of 2 related agenda items. We have resolution number 26-5575 for the purpose of adopting solid waste fees at the Metro transfer stations for fiscal year 26-27, and also resolution number 26-5576 for the purpose of adopting regional system fee for fiscal year 26-27. We are considering 2 major fees today, solid waste fees and the regional system fee. Staff are here to deliver a joint presentation, followed by our vote on each resolution. I'd like to welcome Dr. Marta McGuire, Waste Prevention Environmental Services Director, and Patrick Dennis, the WPES Finance Manager. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Acting Council President Wong and councilors. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. Again, my name is Marta McGuire and I'm Waste Prevention Environmental Services Department Director, and I have here with me Patrick Dennis, our Department Finance Manager. We have a short slide deck for you today. We plan to summarize the engagement that we've done around the proposed budget and fees, and then present the proposed fees for council's consideration. Next slide. We will walk through the major themes we heard through the engagement, including areas of alignment, opportunities for adjustment, and areas of concern raised by stakeholders and how staff are responding. Then provide a summary of the proposed fees related to the resolutions for your consideration. Next slide. The Regional Waste Advisory Committee serves as a key advisor throughout the budget and fee development process. Staff engaged the committee through multiple meetings to review the proposed budget, explain financial conditions, and discuss alignment with regional priorities. An advisory report was developed reflecting both areas of support and areas of further consideration that is provided in the meeting materials. Next slide. We structured our discussion with the committee using a red, yellow, green framework to gather input, identifying areas of alignment, opportunities for refinement, and key concerns. This helped focus discussion on the most critical issues. Next slide. Based on that discussion, the following themes emerged. Overall, there is strong alignment with the direction of the proposal. Committee members expressed support for aligning costs with revenue and improving financial discipline, advancing the system facilities plan and long-term investments, continued investment in core services, and the level of engagement and transparency in the budget process. There was recognition that the current environment reflects and requires difficult decisions and general support for that direction. At the same time, members identified areas for further clarification and refinement. These include a clearer understanding of Metro's agency central service cost increases and internal efficiency efforts, greater transparency in fees, cost drivers, and forecasting assumptions, consideration of transition strategies for the supplemental food scraps funding, and questions around the timing and phasing of capital investments. Members also raised several broader concerns around the long-term sustainability of the funding model, particularly reliance on tonnage-based revenue, affordability and the drivers behind fee increases, ongoing needs to support food scraps policy implementation, and the accuracy and variability of tonnage forecasting. These reflect the broader uncertainty and structural changes in the system that we're currently navigating. Next slide. In addition to the advisory committee engagement, staff hosted a broader budget forum open to local governments, industry, and community partners. The forum was intended to provide additional transparency and create space for questions and dialogue on the proposed budget and fees. The engagement also helped staff better understand areas where additional clarification, communication, or follow-up may be needed. Next slide. Several consistent themes emerged through the discussion that echoed the advisory committee feedback, including central service costs. Participants requested greater clarity on the rising central service costs, cost allocation, and again, internal efficiency efforts. The food scraps funding, concerns were raised about the sunset of the supplemental funding. Participants also recognized the funding was intended as temporary support and that regional compliance rates are now high. There were also questions focused on transfer station operations, staffing, and long-term operational efficiency. There were also comments around the tonnage forecast. Participants requested additional information on the updated tonnage forecast and the financial implications of continued declines in wet waste tonnage. And lastly, participants appreciated the opportunity for early engagement and requested continued dialogue and follow-up throughout the budget process. Next slide. I want to highlight that the input we received identified several areas where staff can take action. At the same time, the feedback overall reinforces the importance of affordability and fee predictability. Based on that, staff are recommending that we maintain the proposed budget and fee structure as presented without any additional changes. This recommendation reflects the need to balance affordability with maintaining essential regional services, our regulatory obligations, and long-term system reliability. The proposed budget already includes significant expenditure reductions, organizational adjustments, and efficiency measures to respond to the current financial conditions. Staff also considered the cumulative fee impact of potential add-backs or restorations raised during engagement. These will require further reductions to regional services or increases in fees, which the stakeholder input cautioned against. Staff also recognize that many of the issues raised throughout the engagement are broader structural questions that will require ongoing policy discussion beyond this budget cycle. Next slide. While staff are not recommending additional budget or fee changes at this time, we are taking a number of actions in response to the stakeholder and committee feedback. that are listed here. First, with regards to transparency and fees, costs, and forecasting, staff will continue to work to improve communication on these materials. We will also be developing a new engagement for the fall to share out the regional forecast, both at a forum and a council work session. To address feedback related to internal cost and efficiency, staff will continue implementing operational alignment work to identify opportunities for efficiency. With regards to the long-term funding model discussion that was raised in the Regional Waste Advisory Committee, and as discussed with Council in March, staff will be initiating a project to assess the system funding model. And lastly, we clearly heard the need to focus on affordability and core service delivery. Staff will continue prioritizing essential services and regulatory obligations while evaluating service levels and capital timing in light of affordability considerations. The intent is to balance near-term financial pressures with maintaining long-term system resilience. I will now turn it over to Patrick to walk through the fees.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Good morning, Metro Councilors. Again, for the record, my name is Patrick Dennis. I am the Finance Manager for Waste Prevention and Environmental Services, and I use he, him pronouns. WPES is primarily funded by two fees, the Regional System Fee and the Solid Waste Fee. The Regional System Fee supports essential regional services, including waste reduction programs, household hazardous waste collection events, grants to local governments, and garbage cleanup on public land. This fee applies to all solid waste when it is disposed of in the region. And the Solid Waste Fee, which supports operations at Metro Central and Metro South transfer stations. This fee is charged on a per ton basis when solid waste is delivered to the Metro transfer stations. Next slide, please. While Metro sets the regional fees for solid waste related activities, local governments work with private garbage and recycling businesses to determine curbside collection rates. Each city and county has its own rate-setting process, and the regional landscape consists of 6 private and 2 public transfer stations, with haulers having flexibility to use any transfer station in the region. Next slide. WPES is guided by a set of criteria that ensure that the department is balancing financial needs with community, environmental, and system-wide impacts. The criteria shown on the screen are used during the fee development process. The 4 priority criteria are accessibility and equity. WPES aims to support a system that works for everyone, regardless of geography or income. This means prioritizing investments that expand access and reduce disparities across the region. Healthy environment. Fees should encourage behaviors and system investments that keep valuable materials out of the landfill and put them to their highest and best use. Affordability, we strongly consider how fees impact users and households and aim to maintain affordability while still delivering essential services and system improvements. Public-private system alignment, our system is built with a mix of public, private, and nonprofit partners. Fees are designed to consider the financial needs of all participants to ensure the system remains reliable and balanced. These criteria help WPES make informed, balanced decisions, supporting a system that is financially sustainable, resilient, and environmentally responsible. Next slide, please. In developing both the regional system fee and the solid waste fee rates, we use quantitative source data for our economic assumptions. The tonnage forecast from the solid waste forecast published on Metro's website in the fall is developed independently by Metro's Revenue and Analytics Division, and we adhere to the Government Finance Officers Association best practice policies. Per Metro Code 5.03.070, WPES must undergo an independent review of the fee setting process. The written report from FCS Group, a Bowman company, is included in your meeting packet. This review by FCS Group confirmed that the overall methodology and resulting fees aligned with industry best practices. Next slide, please. Here's the proposed regional system fee for fiscal year 26-27. As mentioned earlier, this fee is assessed on every ton of waste disposed of in the region. With the closure of Metro Paint and the additional operational and program alignment reductions proposed by WPES leadership, the proposed fee for fiscal year 26-27 is $34.23 per ton, a 5% increase from the current fiscal year fee of $32.60 per ton. The primary cause for the rate increase is the tonnage decline forecasted in the region. The forecast predicts a 103,000 ton difference between what was forecasted for this fiscal year, FY26, in the region compared to next fiscal year. Next slide, please. This graphic is intended to illustrate the expected relative impact to an average residential curbside customer in our region from a 5% increase to the regional system fee. This graphic was developed with a third-party consultant, and the data was collected and compiled from 5 jurisdictions in the region. If Council adopts a 5% increase to the regional system fee, we expect that this would translate to approximately a 5 to 9 cent monthly increase to a residential customer's bill. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates how the regional system fee has changed over time. Through fiscal year 18-19, Metro's fees were relatively stable, supported by a trend of continual tonnage growth. In 2020, Metro froze fees during the economic uncertainty caused by the pandemic. This led to larger increases in fiscal years 22 and 23 to ensure financial stability as costs rapidly increased and operational reserves were used. Since then, rate increases have mirrored inflationary wage growth and regional investment increases to the budget. Next slide, please. Now we'll look at the proposed solid waste fee for fiscal year 26-27. This fee is charged to customers at the Metro Central and Metro South transfer stations to recuperate the full cost of services, including the proposed alignment of service hours at Metro South and the proposed additional revenue generation from credit card fees. The proposed solid waste fee for fiscal year 26-27 is $123.41 per ton, a 10% increase from the current fiscal year fee of $112.19 per ton. The primary cause of this rate increase is also the tonnage decline forecasted for Metro's 2 transfer stations. The forecast predicts a combined 57,000 ton difference between what was forecasted to flow through Metro's 2 transfer stations for this fiscal year compared to next fiscal year. Next slide, please. Similarly, this graphic is intended to illustrate the expected impact to the average residential curbside customer from a 10% increase to the solid waste fee. If Council adopts a 10% increase to the solid waste fee, we expect that this would translate to approximately a 50 cent to 90 cent monthly increase to a residential customer's bill. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates how the solid waste fee has changed over time. Solid waste fee related expenses continue to be impacted by fixed cost escalations and the need to maintain and strengthen regional assets and infrastructure across depressed tonnage volumes. Like other utilities that provide essential services, the cost of operations continues to rise due to regional economic conditions. Next slide, please. Here is a summary of the proposed fee changes. The staff scale house fee charged to self-haul customers at Metro's transfer stations who interact with staff members as they pass through the scale house is proposed to increase to $30, a 7.1% increase. The automated scale house fee charged to customers who use the automated non-staff scale house is proposed to increase to $8.34, a 6.2% increase. Residential organics is proposed to increase to $110.53, a 10% increase. Commercial organics is proposed to increase to $94.25, a 7.2% increase. As shown on the previous 2 slides, the solid waste fee is proposed to increase by 10% and the regional system fee is proposed to increase by 5%. The community enhancement fee is proposed to stay at $1. The excise tax, which is calculated by a formula in Metro Code, is proposed to increase to $16.17, 11.8% increase. And the minimum load charge is proposed to increase by $4 from $47 to $51, with the weight limit remaining unchanged at 240 pounds. Finally, the tip fee, the total fee for 1 ton of mixed solid waste delivered to Metro's transfer stations would increase from $162.14 to $176.70, or a 9% increase year over year. Next slide, please. You have 2 resolutions before you today. Resolution 265575 for the purpose of adopting solid waste fees at Metro transfer stations and Metro's community enhancement fee for fiscal year 26-27. Apologies for the typo on the slide. And Resolution 26-5576 for the purpose of adopting the regional system fee for fiscal year 26-27. That concludes our presentation. Thank you for your time and consideration on these resolutions, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we'll answer the questions. Let's start with Councilor Noel.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I don't so much have questions as comments to make. Appreciate all the effort that the team at WPES has undertaken to bring this information to us. The different places and opportunities that they've provided for public input. And they're pretty sharp pencils when it comes to looking at opportunities to make cost reductions or make more efficient our services. And having said that, I want to really validate the concerns that have been raised by members of the RWAC and by members of RWAC who represent their constituencies, if you will. For example, the Recycling Association, who represents haulers and private facilities, the cities, who represent many of the 24 cities in the region, and who else did we have? I think those are the 2 main ones. This is a very tough issue to get control of. And it's exacerbated, as we've talked about many times as a council, by the simple arithmetic that as we are achieving, maybe not for the reasons we'd like to have achieved, but we are nonetheless experiencing a reduction in wet waste tonnage sent to landfills. It puts pressure on the per ton fees that we have to charge in order to keep the system financially viable. This council has done a lot to restore credibility and trust between Metro, specifically WPES, and the stakeholders at the city level who set, as Patrick mentioned, curbside collection rates, the private part of the system, as well as the nonprofit part of the system. But I think we're approaching a point where the investment we have made in improving transparency, improving community engagement, and rebuilding trust may be slightly at risk because there are some substantive aspects of the budgeting and rate setting process that we have not been as clear and open about as some of our stakeholders would like. I told the RWAC, and I share with you, I've told the Director McGuire and her team that I support the recommendation they've made. And I would commit, if I continue to serve as chair of RWAC, that we look at those opportunities for more transparency and opportunity for appropriate engagement of stakeholders in the decision-making process. But garbage collection, recycling are fundamental utilities that are absolutely necessary for a civil society. And I do not think now is a time for us to retreat from the progress that we've made so far. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Chair. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I'm going to pick up where Councilor Nolan left off in that the work that we do is essential utility, and it is a unique ecosystem that we support within our region. I don't think there's anywhere else that has this unique blend of having public and private operating in tandem, sometimes in partnership, sometimes it's a competitive environment, but we are able to meet the needs of our region and keep the kinds of services that we want funded because of fees. Unlike a lot of other utilities that do receive a lot of federal money and federal support, federal loans, our system is all contained with funding here in the region. Very weird that my own internet connection is unstable. That's a utility that somebody could work on. But I really feel like we've hit the right balance here with these rates, because we do recognize that all utilities are going up while we are in the midst of this affordability crisis. But we're also able to preserve some of the things that people absolutely rely on. I was at a neighborhood association on Tuesday night, and to be able to pass out the RID number and say, anytime you see trash here outside this building, on the side of the road, in public space, you call this number and we'll be there in a matter of days. That was a relief to those folks living in Oregon City, concerned about the livability of their neighborhood. That is something that we can guarantee. It is something that we have control over. And as there's so few things in this world that we have control over, I don't want us to step back from the promises and commitments we've made, particularly rebuilding our system after COVID. So understanding that the letters that we've received over the past few days are generally asking two things. One, lower the rate, and two, add money very specifically to an education program. As I look at the request, it's lower the rate, add money back. I don't know what else there is to cut. We've cut to, the proposal's already assuming pretty much cutting to the bone with our staff. We'll have a budget conversation later about where we might be able to find add back dollars. But I do not see us being able to cut this rate anymore and provide the base level of service that people expect. So that is why I'm supportive of the rate, supportive of the work that RWAC and staff have done to get us here, and also the commitment that we have to figuring out how we're going to continue to pay for this system and the public services necessary, even as we continue to make cuts in the amount of tonnage that we send to landfill, because it's unsustainable to keep at the current level of landfilling that we have. Thank you, acting president.
Councilor Rosenthal.
There's a bit of feedback in the audio.
I think it's Carrie.
Oh, okay.
Is it? It's not me this time.
I do think your Zoom is unmuted. Sorry.
Sorry.
All right, thank you. Sorry, Councilor. I just wanted to check the audio was kind of frustrating.
Okay. Now we can't hear anything,
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I wanted,
at least virtually.
You can't hear anything? Okay.
are we okay?
Councilor Simpson, can you hear anything?
Can you hear us?
Nolan, can you hear us?
Councilor Lewis must have been so eloquent that you are all now speechless.
That's not what happened.
Well said.
Let's hold on one second.
Technical difficulties, please hold.
I have,
It's possible everyone was like force muted.
are we good to go or not?
Not yet.
We're still waiting.
Still
right?
waiting.
Test.
Yes, I just heard Councilor Rosenthal. Now I hear Councilor Lewis. We're good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to thank for the presentation. I think we've done, there's been a lot of transitions in the last couple of years in terms of going to a zero-based budgeting. We've had better accountability. We've reactivated the RWAC. I want to thank staff for responding to all this and trying to be as clear and transparent as possible. I'm sure there's always some tweaks and some improvement we can make. I also want to appreciate the fact that RWAC is submitted to comments, and also that all of the various other participants, the private participants, got together and submitted comments that particularly it seems to call for just a little clearer information gathering, and I think that's good. I think we can't control all the factors that we have. So I think, and people, we provide the service that people expect to have their garbage picked up. And I think that that's been going on fairly effectively. And I think it's a good thing. Of course, people expect it, and it doesn't really generate that much goodwill. What I think are the things that generate goodwill, and that would be the RID patrol, and then also the community hazardous waste events. And so the only question I really have at this point, because we haven't talked about it, is we'll be able, I'm assuming under this budget, we'll be able to continue those community hazardous waste events at the same level that we have been doing those, because they're very popular and also quite important. And so that's my simple question.
Yes, we will be continuing with our collection events, our household hazardous waste collection events across the region at the same capacity as in this current fiscal year. We've actually, with our large scale, gotten back to where we were prior to the pandemic. So, and in some instances, we've been testing the 2-day events back to back in areas where there is a lot of demand.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Well, I just want to appreciate all the hard work that Chair Nolan and everyone that's done to get us to this point. Really appreciate the slides on kind of impact to individual households. As someone that now pays $12 a month extra on my water bill for functioning roads, and I pulled my Toyota Camry up for $88. I think we're all very price sensitive, but the changes to individual households are 55 cents a month, so about $6 a year, which actually seems really great in comparison to other increases that our constituents have experienced over the last year. So kudos to that. I do think we've cut as much as we can, and that we're just striking the balance between maintaining service and affordability. So hats off, thank you. I have been getting a lot of feedback. I think Wisconsin's been getting a lot of feedback on the food scraps program, and I've just been hearing how impactful it is in terms of like having a measurable impact on greenhouse gas reduction. And I'm wondering, I think there's been some proposals around an extension with some cuts. Like, would that be feasible and possible without changing rates, or is that no?
Well, so I can give you a little bit of background. We talked about the supplemental food scraps funding in our budget presentation. As you know, the region adopted a regional recycling requirement around food scraps to help support food waste reduction. That was a shared goal among metro cities and counties. Many communities have that in their climate action plans as a goal, so that was developed collaboratively. Historically, when Metro has adopted a regional requirement, we've always coupled that with an initial set of funding to help with onboarding and bringing impacted parties into compliance. We did that with the business recycling requirement. It is a time-limited investment. So originally it was set for 5 years, and we had implementation delays, and it was proposed to sunset this year, and that's how it shows up in the budget. We've invested more than $6 million to date in that supplemental funding. However, Metro is continuing our annual per capita grant funding that we provide to local governments. That's $2.2 million. That's included in the budget. That's flexible funding that local governments can use to support waste reduction programming, and also helps support meeting state waste reduction requirements. So there is local governments will continue to receive funding to help support their programming. In addition, we've talked about the Recycling Modernization Act funding. That is a new funding stream. It is specific to contamination and recycling education, but there are some opportunities where governments may be able to use some of that funding instead of the per capita funding that they receive from Metro. We did do the calculations. If we were to add that back in, it would increase the regional system fee up to 8%. We felt like that was it, and then overall increase the tipping fee. We were really trying to balance affordability, and looking at a lot of the input we got from stakeholders was to keep the fee low. And so there were just really difficult decisions we had to make in terms of trade-offs.
Understood. I'd be interested in my colleagues' thoughts, so Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, thanks. You actually just asked my question, Acting President Wong. Well, first, I just want to share some high-level thoughts. I agree with kind of the general sentiment from the council that we wanted to try and cut to the bone as much as possible without impacting core services to folks. And I appreciate the the significant impact that that's had. I mean, I think if I remember the number correctly, we're laying off 11% of the employees in WPES. That's a huge number. I hope that kind of partners come along with us in understanding that. And I wanted to ask a very similar question. We got a letter from one of the mayors in my district, Mayor Beatty, asking for us to consider a different allocation. And I wanted to ask the same question. What are the options that we have to do that? If there are any options.
Yeah, it's very much up to council if they would like to make changes. That would require a change to the budget, and that would require a change to the fee.
Okay. I guess I'm asking myself at this point, well, what would that look like in terms of this conversation and actually trying to evaluate the options? I mean, there's nothing else we could deprioritize from the budget, I'm assuming.
I don't believe. I mean, as we've discussed, we've really. If we were to make any more reductions within WPES, we'd be looking at cutting a line of service. So, which other program would council want to balance to create capacity for this grant funding? We've kind of scaled back all of our materials and services. We've already closed a significant program, Metro Paint, this year. We are adjusting our service hours. So those are the trade-offs. And a big part of what we prioritized was making sure that we were protecting regional services that aren't provided by local governments, because there are areas that Metro operate, like Councilor Lewis just mentioned, RID illegal dumping, cleanup, things that Metro does that is not offered at the local government level. Right. I think we started local government grants, when we look at the fee chart, more than 2 decades ago, in providing supplemental funding to support local waste reduction programs. It was initially started when we were rolling out curbside programs and no government had any type of solid waste staff or programming. And we've been able to continue that level of funding over time because waste generation has grown. But I think there's a bigger question around Metro's role to subsidize local government programs and whether that's something that council wants to continue to prioritize as a trade-off to what we can offer at the regional investments that we do. So $6 million we've invested in the local government food scraps funding. We're at an 85% compliance rate. I believe City of Beaverton has food waste reduction in their climate action plan, so it's a goal for the city that they've identified. So it's really council's kind of discretion around how you want to balance trade-offs in the budget cycle.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a really interesting philosophical question that
council grapple with that Director McGuire is highlighting. When we do things like the food waste program, we have traditionally, my understanding, has provided some implementation funding. It is not intended to be ongoing permanent support for those local governments. This was a 5-year program, it was extended to 7 years, it was scheduled to end, and I think those jurisdictions hopefully we're planning on that. I also know, as having done budgets at local jurisdictions, when those funds disappear, it's really hard. And you have staff that maybe have supported or other programs, and I think that's what we're hearing from. I guess I would say, I don't think when council passed the food waste program, and again, in consultation with all the local governments, there was not a plan to permanently subsidize the operations of governments as a result. We do have some revenue sharing, and I think there may be, I think it would be really challenging in this budget, given where we are. I think there are some conversations we could have about whether council would like to raise fees higher in order to, share more of that funding with local jurisdictions. Obviously, that is a huge trade-off, because we've also heard about wanting to keep those fees down. I think that's something we could talk about moving forward and talk to some of our local jurisdictions about. But I would do it more in that context rather than a specific program, which I think was, again, scheduled to end.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. You know, I just wanted to like raise the question again in kind of my specific context, given, you know, the deep value I have for our partnership with the city of Beaverton, and with all of our cities in the region, and just wanted to like really rigorously follow the thread of that question, and I think that we've landed in that. You know, I think we're like many of our local partners that are facing, you know, different cuts. So the something has to give feels like the perfect kind of line of thinking here. You're right, Andrew, that this was a 5-year program that was extended to 7 years. We've created the extension, and this money was intended to sunset. And so I certainly hope that there are future opportunities for us to collaborate with our partners. I just know that from talking to my constituents every day, their number one concern and priority is affordability and cost of living. And our rate setting is one of our, like everyone on the dais has shared, is one of the utility responsibilities that we have here. And it is just very challenging for me to be in a position to want to raise fees more than we absolutely need to. And so I feel the tension there, and certainly hope that we have an opportunity to work with our very important RWAC partners, but with our regional partners, that we have these ambitious goals for our waste and recycling system. But thank you so much for that. And then another element in some of the testimony that we've received as well is like, you know, putting together some kind, and I know I got here late, so if this was already touched on, please let me know. But one of the other elements in the communication to us was to kind of set an independent table to talk about how rates are being set. So I'm kind of curious what that might look like. I mean, I also think that is the responsibility of the RWAC, and maybe a more deeper focus of the RWAC or subcommittee there. But certainly, I think if our partners are asking for us to look at something, we value transparency, accountability, and being open as possible in the machinations of that rate setting. So can you just kind of talk to that second element of that?
Yes, as you noted, we have a number of bodies set up. We're always open to having a conversation for a committee or a work group that has a specific scope or topic. Many of the topics related to budget and fees are done through the Regional Waste Advisory Committee engagement, the budget forums. We also have 2 local government work groups that meet on a monthly basis. The Regional Waste Advisory Committee specifically, the scope of it and the membership was changed with the intent of reviewing and providing input on budget and fees. That was the primary overhaul that we did last year in response to the Waste Fee Policy Task Force. So I do believe we have a table that is providing that review. In addition, Patrick mentioned our code mandates an independent review of our annual rate setting process. So we do have a third party that looks at our fee setting process, the methodology, making sure that it meets financial best practices and Metro Charter assumptions. We are always open to having, like I mentioned, an additional group that has a specific task, and as a part of RWAC, Councilor Nolan, as the chair, can identify issues that would be able for any additional committee to tackle.
Thanks. So, thank you.
Chair Nolan.
This is a fabulous conversation, and I appreciate everyone weighing in. For me, it seems to really illustrate the tension that develops out of difficult budget decisions. And I would say, on a whole, this is a difficult but not excruciating budget decision. But one that we will not please every desire when we make a decision. Sometimes we can appease several parties by some midpoint, but eventually there's a fee and there's a list of services that fee supports, and we make the decision. one of the questions I think we need to address is, since we have this RWAC that is designed to look at budget and fee, to talk about how many layers of the onion we peel back to engage them, or should the RWAC be at a higher macro level of recommendation to the council, and we defer, should RWAC, for example, be asked what rate increases should be our maximum for this year? We already have a policy that says 8%. This budget has been cut, and nonetheless still would constitute a combined 9% increase. So should RWAC recommend something that's contrary to a policy that council itself established? It's a genuine question, not rhetorical. Should RWAC recommend a maximum rate increase and defer entirely to the staff and the chief operating officer's office to determine how to achieve that rate increase and which services to maintain and which to consolidate or bring in-house, for example, with Metro South in an attempt to lower costs? How much do we want the RWAC, and frankly, how much do we want the council engaged in the details of operating decisions? Sometimes we want the council engaged because we're feeling a little squeeze from our partners. Totally reasonable. That's why we invite their participation. But I think that's where the edges of this conversation are. And given my understanding of the decisions we as a council have made, I think going forward, we've struck the right balance. Having said all that, I want to be clear that I think there remain opportunities for us to make more substantive and more involved the participation from the RWAC. Rather than adding another committee, which I appreciate the director being open to, I think additional committees actually confound the decision-making process. Then you have different bodies, task forces, or technical committees, or elected official committees offering competing advice, which means we're not really getting integrated recommendations from our stakeholders. So I would recommend against an additional committee, but I would recommend in favor of really clarifying the charge, if we want to make changes to the charge to RWAC, because that's a council decision. And as I think Andrew said, if that's the direction that the council wants to go, that should be accomplished in a different setting than an actual budget ordinance.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I did want to ask a question directed to the director. As the residents of Oregon City are my constituents, they love the service they get at Metro South. With these rates, can you describe the changes that they will see at the transfer station and the changes they will not see at their transfer station, Metro South?
Thank you for that question. As we've shared as a part of our budget proposal, we will be shortening the hours for Metro South. So that is a change that the residents will see. We are currently open 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. That will change to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So there will be an adjustment in terms of people's individual practices and when they visit. However, what won't change is we will continue to be open 7 days a week. That was something that we really contemplated and we felt was important for people that might work non-traditional work schedules or that might need additional days in the week to get there. So that will not change. I will say I was at Metro South last night around that hour, and it is substantially slower during that time. So Hopefully this, we'll be able to manage those changes, but we recognize that impacts individuals' day-to-day behaviors. The other change individuals will see is the credit card processing fee that was proposed just to align with a customer's payment experience. What will not change is the excellent customer service and the amazing team that we have out there in providing folks support as they move through the transfer stations. The hours for household hazardous waste will also remain unchanged.
And we're not losing any line of service in terms of item you bring there today, you'll be able to bring after. we do
All
this.
services will remain.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no more questions, we'll begin with a vote on the solid waste fees, starting with resolution number 26-5575. Is there a motion on the resolution?
I move adoption.
I will second.
Okay. Motion is moved by Councilor Nolan and seconded by Councilor Gonzalez. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Georgia, will you please call for roll?
Yes. Counselor Simpson is no longer here. Counselor Nolan.
Yes.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Yes.
And Acting Council President Wong.
Aye, the resolution passes. We'll move on then to resolution number 26-5576. Is there a motion?
I will move adoption.
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Councilor Rosenthal, seconded by Councilor Lewis. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's move on to a roll call.
All right. I'm promoting Counselor Simpson to panelist real quick. Counselor Nolan.
Yes.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Yes.
Counselor Simpson.
Aye.
And Acting Council President Wong.
Aye, thank you. The resolution passes, and I just want to send our thank you to RWAC, to Chair Nolan, the whole WPS team. I know it's been a lot of hard conversations, but I think balanced all our values and expectations well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, if I might,
Oh, please.
because of personal obligations, Vice Chair Lewis has chaired the last two meetings through some very difficult discussions and done an exemplary job of that role. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor Nolan. And I was just going to say, I know that there's much discussion we want to continue to have, and there are many who would have said, why'd we vote today? I want to remind folks that one of the
Okay,
loudest...
Mahoney. I'm coming.
We got you, Ashton.
Oh, sorry.
One of the loudest voices we hear is from our municipalities saying, do these rates earlier for predictability and for our process. So while it may feel unfulfilling that we did this today and didn't continue to linger, I felt like it was really, really important that we honored that we do this work in May. We do not do this in June. So thank you, colleagues.
Thank you.
Thanks. Can I ask a kind of a process council question? Sorry, kind of might implicate. Sorry. So in our current structure, I'm not sure if Kristen is here, but when the council receives a letter from our partners, usually it was the council president that kind of always made sure that we responded to the partners. So I want to make sure that
Yes.
everyone that submitted testimony to us that we respond. Right.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Great. I just want to make sure that we get back to them and respect their
Yes,
engagement.
Acting President Wong has asked us to provide those responses. So
Okay, excellent.
we've got one out and the rest will go out by the end of this week.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to ordinances, starting with ordinance number 26-1543 for purpose of annexing to the metro boundary approximately 10 acres in North Bethany along Northwest Kaiser Road. I will now ask Carrie McLaren, the Metro Attorney, to please read the procedural requirements for this portion of the meeting.
Thank you. Because this annexation involves a land use application that requires a quasi-judicial hearing, there are some additional procedural requirements that must be addressed. First, councilors must declare a conflict of interest or ex parte contact prior to the staff presentation. If a councilor has a conflict of interest, they are not allowed to participate in the council discussion or vote on that application. If a councilor has an ex parte contact, they must declare the substance of it on the record, and it is subject to rebuttal. Discussions with Metro staff are not considered ex parte contacts. Councilors will be asked to declare any conflict of interest or an ex parte contact after I describe additional procedural requirements. For quasi-judicial hearings of this type, Oregon land use statutes require the following statement of required procedures. Under Section 3.09.070 of the Metro Code, this type of annexation into the Metro District boundary must be initiated by petition, which must be reviewed and acted on by the council following a public hearing. Public testimony at this hearing should only address the applicable review criteria. The approval criteria are set forth in Section 3.09.070 of the Metro Code and are more specifically identified in the staff report, which is part of the packet of materials before the council today. The decision of the council is final, although it can be challenged by filing a notice of intent to appeal with the Land Use Board of Appeals within 21 days of the final decision. If any person fails to raise an issue in person during the hearing or by letter, or fails to provide sufficient evidence to allow the council to respond to an issue, that issue may not be the basis for an appeal to LUBA. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to give the council an opportunity to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in circuit court under ORS Chapter 197. I think it's specifically 197.796. First, Metro staff will present a short report. The staff report will describe the proposal, identify the applicable approval criteria, and summarize the staff recommendation. The applicant may then make a presentation in support of their application. Following the applicant's presentation, other persons in support of the application will be given the opportunity to speak. Opponents of the application, if any, will have the opportunity to speak, followed by rebuttal testimony from rebuttal testimony from the applicant. Public testimony will then be closed. After the record is closed to all parties, councilors may discuss the request and ask questions of staff. A council vote will not be held until after the second reading. This hearing is part of the official record. In your testimony, please speak specifically about this application and how the criteria relate to the request. Please submit a copy of any written testimony, and we will maintain that as part of the record. And if I may, Roger, can I ask you to respond whether or not we believe we might need to leave the record and hearing open today?
Yes, thanks. Good morning, councilors. Thank you, Carrie. Roger Alfred, Office of Metro Attorney. As you probably know, we have received some letters of, I think, 2 items in opposition to this matter, and the original plan was to try to get this adopted today and in order to help get this housing built. But because we have some opposition, we're not going to do it. We're not going to be able to do it that way, and we're going to have a second reading on this. And depending on how things happen today, we may need to continue this hearing to a later date. And that'll be somewhat based on what we hear in terms of opposition. So we have to just sort of leave that open, I think, for now. And at the end, we'll make a decision about what the next steps are.
So if I could, just to summarize that, a little bit of additional procedure. If we have an opponent come to the public hearing today, and if that opponent requests that the record be left open or the hearing continued, council will need to do so, and then we will need to identify which date we're doing that on. So we'll see and address that during the hearing today, and then I will advise you at the end.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Great, thank you.
But now would be the time, sorry for that additional procedural part, for you to ask councilors if they've had any ex parte contacts or if they have any conflicts of interest to declare.
Yep. So case matter being reviewed and proposed is ordinance number 26-1543 for purpose of annexing to the metro boundary approximately 10 acres of North Bethany along Northwest Kaiser Road. Do council members have any ex parte contacts to disclose? None. Seeing none. Do council members have a conflict of interest in the matter?
No.
Seeing none. Okay, so we'll call on Senior Regional Planner Glenn Hamburg to introduce the ordinance.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Acting Council President Wong and councilors. I'm Glenn Hamburg, Senior Regional Planner, and I use he, him pronouns. And I wonder if we have the slide deck. Terrific. I'm here to present staff's findings on the application to annex these approximately 10 acres of unincorporated Washington County to Metro's service district boundary, which is otherwise known as just the Metro boundary. I'll address some of the submitted written testimony regarding the application and ultimately recommend approval of the ordinance, which is ordinance number 26-1543. Because the submitted testimony touches on some locational issues as well as some potential future development of the subject property, I thought it would be helpful this time around to share some maps and some other visuals. Next slide, please. So the smaller map on the right of the screen is of the entire metro region and its cities, and the unincorporated areas that are inside of our urban growth boundary. That's the red line. And then to the left of that is a close-up of the broader area where the subject property is located. You'll see here the label for the North Bethany area of unincorporated Washington County. That's generally northeast of Hillsborough and north of Beaverton and the Sunset Highway and west of Portland. Again, the urban growth boundary is the red line on this map, with lands inside the UGB being those more or less to the south of it. Next slide, please. So I've put a small purple box on this map. That purple box shows the location of a couple of dated aerial images over to the right. These areas happen to be bisected by Northwest Kaiser Road. At the top right is an aerial image of the area from about 2015. You can see that just about a decade ago, this area was largely just open fields and pasture land, with some pockets of forest areas generally located near streams. There's also some Christmas tree farms and some timber stands. There's really minimal development at this point, but nonetheless some starts of urbanization. Then below that image is the same area just less than a decade later. You can see here just how much this area has developed over this time, largely with detached single-family dwellings, townhomes, multifamily housing, as well as a school. Much of the forested areas present from a decade ago also still remain. And we can take a better look at that 2024 aerial image on the next slide, please. So here's that image. Obviously, lots of new housing, that school, and some road networks. This development would have been approved by Washington County, consistent with the county's duly adopted land use plans and implementing regulations that have already been formally determined by Metro to comply with our requirements for their plans and regulations. And as you look around this image, you might spot some dead-ending streets and even what appear to be some sort of missing portions of otherwise complete subdivisions. Next slide, please. So some of these tracts in this area, shown here in yellow, are still outside of the Metro boundary, the service district boundary. Per Title 11 of Metro's Urban Growth Management Functional Plan, as well as Washington County's own development code provisions, these areas would first need to be annexed to the Metro boundary, as well as to some other service districts, before they could ever be urbanized by the county. So that is before any currently dead-ending streets were to be extended through these areas or sewer services provided. These areas would need to be brought into the service district, even though they're already inside of our urban growth boundary and already surrounded by urban development. Next slide, please. So one of these tracts, this roughly 10-acre shaded green area on the east side of Northwest Kaiser Road, south of the school, is the subject of this application today. You'll notice, if you look carefully, in the northeast corner of this territory, that's the upper left, is where there's sort of a gap in an existing subdivision. With this gap, there are actually 3 dead-ending streets. These dead ends might limit things like vehicle throughput, emergency vehicle access, and the ability to develop some housing in an area that has, again, already been designated for urban development by inclusion in the UGB and through comprehensive planning by Washington County. The dead ending streets, I'll note, even have posted signs on them alerting neighbors that these roads will eventually be extended as part of future development. Next slide. So here and on a following slide are just some drawings of potential future development of the subject property, which is outlined in red, and of adjoining territory. So to be totally clear, or at least as clear as I can be, these drawings were provided voluntarily by the applicant and are part of a separate development application being considered by Washington County. They're shown here only for conversational context. This illustrated development is not approved yet by the county and, indeed, could change as it goes through the county's own local process. But the drawings nonetheless give a sense of what the applicant for this metro boundary annexation has been contemplating. Their potential development project, which I'll show in more detail in the next slide, involves just the northeast corner of the subject territory and some adjoining areas of that existing nearly complete subdivision. And here is that next slide. The contemplated development to potentially be considered by the county, not by Metro, here is also provided by the applicant. It shows the project site outlined in purple. The prospective project could connect those 3 dead-ending streets and include 16 new dwelling units outside of a defined wetland buffer on the subject property. Again, though, this potential development is not yet approved by Washington County and cannot be until the territory is first annexed to Metro into other service districts. It's Washington County's charge to consider, through its own process and according to its own criteria, whether this or any other proposed development meets their criteria that are based on their transportation studies, their road standards and parking requirements, their and other service providers' wetland protection requirements, the county's siting standards, and so forth. Next slide. What's before the Metro Council today is an application with consenting petition from the property owner for this private property to be added to Metro's service district. Annexation does not itself authorize any development. The territory might be annexed to Metro and potentially never developed, or the territory might be developed with something other than what I showed on those previous illustrations. However, annexation of the territory is one of many prerequisites for the property ever being developed consistent with the county's standards. So one might ask, other than just being required before development, what else happens when a territory is annexed to Metro? Well, annexed territories benefit from some location-based Metro services, some of which you heard about already this morning. For example, Metro's RID Patrol service. When the territory is annexed to the Metro boundary, RID Patrol will be able to respond to and clean up illegal dumping in the territory. By being annexed, the territory would also be subject to Metro taxes, including construction excise taxes that support local planning for development and habitat protection. And then eligible voters living in the annexed territory will also be able to participate in Metro elections. State law effectively requires an application and petition to annex territory to Metro if that territory was in the UGB before 2009 and is not being annexed concurrently to any city. That's the case here. The territory was added to the UGB back in 2002 with Metro Council's adoption of ordinance number 02-987A, and it's not being annexed to any city. So as noted, future urban development would occur under Washington County's land use jurisdiction, hence the need for this application. Next slide, please. The Metro boundary annexation approval criteria are in Metro Code subsection 309070E and are listed here on the screen. As detailed in the staff report, the application meets these criteria. The subject property is in the urban growth boundary, having been added in 2002 by ordinance 02-987A. The edge of the UGB is in fact actually about 1/3 of a mile from the subject territory. The territory is indeed also subject to measures that will prevent its urbanization until it is annexed to service districts that provide necessary urban services. Specifically, section 501-10.2 of Washington County's Community Development Code provides that, quote, "An application for development approval within the North Bethany sub-area plan shall be denied unless the applicant demonstrates that the property has been annexed to a series of service districts, including Metro." So the territory is in the county's North Bethany sub-area plan and is therefore subject to measures that prevent its urbanization until it is annexed to service districts that will provide necessary urban services. Finally, with the territory already in the UGB and already planned and zoned for urban residential uses by Washington County, it is not subject to any urban reserve concept plan. Notice of this application was provided to Washington County itself and to urban service providers. Neither the county nor any service provider has asserted that the proposal to annex this territory to the metro boundary is itself inconsistent with any adopted cooperative or urban service agreements that they may have with each other. In fact, in response to Metro's notice, Tualatin Valley Water District proactively submitted a copy of a Tualatin Valley Water District Board Resolution 05-12 endorsing annexation of the subject territory to the Water District's service area. Next slide. So Metro mailed notice of this application to nearly 300 nearby property owners and other interested parties, including the county and relevant service districts. As of close of business yesterday, staff had received one written comment, but an update to this slide is that we have received a second comment just before 9 p.m. yesterday. Both comments are already in the record. I've had the opportunity to communicate with both commenters and to understand that some of their concerns may actually be with applications for annexation to other service districts and with particular development plans to be considered by the county. Nonetheless, I've responded to some of the concerns in detail in a memo yesterday that is also in the record, and I'll go ahead and just summarize some of the comments' main concerns here again. One of the comments had concerns that a narrative in the application was not responding to the appropriate criteria. It appears that this concern is actually about a narrative for a different application at the county. Metro does not require a narrative addressing approval criteria to be provided by the applicant for annexation to our service district. Rather, staff offer written findings explaining whether and how the application meets relevant Metro Code criteria, and that staff report is in the record. A comment also questioned whether the property was indeed subject to measures that will prevent its urbanization until annexed to the necessary service districts. It is, specifically those provisions cited in Title 11 of Metro Code and Chapter 307 of Metro Code, and in Washington County's Development Code. A comment also had questions about certain service provider letters of record. Staff understands that this commenter is actually referencing service provider letters submitted to Washington County for a development application, not the service district annexation application. The only document from a service provider in this application's record is from Tualatin Valley Water District, specifically a resolution from the district's board endorsing annexation of the territory to their service district. There were also concerns about inconsistency in stated acreage and how such inconsistencies might undermine the ability for us to determine whether or not the territory really is in the urban growth boundary. There is no inconsistency in the references to the subject's territory's size in the Metro boundary annexation record. Nothing in the Metro annexation application materials include references to the subject property being fewer than 9 acres. The Metro boundary annexation application does include a Washington County tax map identifying a roughly 9.65 acre taxable area. The territory that is subject of this application was appropriately described in the public notice for annexation as approximately 10 acres, with an accompanying map. The record also includes a legal description and a map certified as accurate by Washington County's Tax Assessor's Cartography Department. The references in the testimony to other acreages, for example 2.62 acres, may actually be with other applications submitted to and being reviewed by Washington County for separate purposes. For example, that development area in the northeast corner of that property. The subject property is in the urban growth boundary. Finally, a comment stated that county staff recommended denial of development applications based on certain factors. To be clear, an April 16th, 2026 Washington County recommendation for denial to their hearings officer was in regards to a development application, not this annexation application. The only matter noted in that April 16th recommendation is that the property needs to be annexed to Metro and to other service districts. The recommendation from staff did note that the territory is not within 200 feet of any identified floodplain or drainage hazard and does not contain any significant natural resources. So, having found that this application meets our criteria for annexation to Metro service district boundary, staff recommends approval of the ordinance. But I'm certainly available to help answer some questions. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Glenn? Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, just one quick question. There was on the map, there showed a green sward that sort of touched the lower portion of this. What was that particular area outlined as?
Yeah, I might have that applicant address it on their illustration, but to my understanding, it is a wetland buffer on the subject property in which there would not be any development proposed under the development application to be considered by the county. So there's a presumed wetland area and then a buffer from that wetland area restricting development close to it.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no more questions, we'll open up a public hearing on ordinance number 26-1543. Georgia, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for a public hearing?
If you are testifying on ordinance number 26-1543, now is the time to do so. If you are testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by using the raise hand function in the reactions or more menus or by dialing *9. When it is your turn to testify, I'll call in your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist, and you can turn on your camera if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes. The timer begins when you begin speaking. If you are testifying in person, their timer is located at the testimony table, on the wall, and on the digital screen. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. All right, we do have folks who have signed up to speak.
Okay.
The first one is Chris Green.
Thank you, Acting President and Council members. Chris Green with OTAC, here on behalf of the applicant. We concur with the staff recommendation and feel staff has correctly identified some of the concerns raised in the comments as relating to those other applications that are pending on the property. So in addition to the prerequisite that staff mentioned today of being annexed to Metro, Washington County will hold a hearing on annexation into several service districts that are required, and a hearing on the development application itself. And so each of those hearings are also noticed to nearby property owners in a separate manner. And so there's been a lot of notices on those, and we feel that those comments related to the nature of the land use application are best addressed through that process. But I'm available for any questions about the project or our application.
Thank you. Questions?
I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I guess I was supposed to actually say that we will take first testimony from the applicant and those wishing to testify in support, which we just did. And now we'll take testimony from anyone wishing to testify in opposition.
So we do have one person who has their hand raised in the virtual audience. I am not sure if they are testifying in support or in opposition. Should we promote them?
Let's just promote them.
Great, thank you.
Yes, hello, Acting Council President Wang, council members, and Metro staff. My name is Chris Christensen, for the record, Beaverton, Oregon. And I just want to go on the record in opposition to this annexation. I think the stark contrast between the 10-year time pictures shows exactly my concern, which is namely balance. There is already some concern about this being a wetland buffer. And as you can see, the existing area over the last 10 years has been heavily developed in urbanization to make the impression that this annexation is not a precursor to continued development. That area would be patently false. Obviously, the further development of that area relies on the annexation project, which again, I oppose. In a word, I would say you really need to seek balance particularly when looking at development projects on the perimeter of the urban growth boundary. We have to maintain some of the pre-existing nature of that area. I mean, this was forest and farmland, and as mentioned, this is a wetland area, so there are birds and wildlife that travel through that area, and obviously the appeal of further taxation of the area, and it would be easy to look around and say, well, the rest of the area is now highly urbanized, so why shouldn't this area be highly urbanized? And I think, again, it goes back to the question of balance. So there are limitations to how much development the perimeter of the urban growth boundary can support. And this just pushes out the development, particularly high-density urban development, even further. There are better opportunities farther in the urban growth boundary for urban infill development. This is not one of them. And once this area is annexed and developed, it's lost forever as a nature area or as a wetland area, despite the comments that the wetland area would be preserved. Obviously, with heavy development that closely abutting a nature area, it really does destroy the preservation. That is a flyway for many, many species of birds and animals, as I said. Animals don't fly, of course, but for the birds, and it's an important thing for the Metro Council to recognize when they're looking at annexation in the perimeter of the urban growth boundary to try and strike a balance. So I would oppose this annexation for that purpose, and I would continue to see a portion of that area remain in the same condition that it currently stays in. So thank you for allowing me to place my comments on the record.
Thank you.
Acting Council President Wong, another person has raised their hand in the virtual audience. I'm going to promote them to panelists.
Okay.
Unmute. Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. My name is Jerry Sadin. I'm a resident, and I look at this wetland every day. I don't have the knowledge whether or not the comments that were just made are accurate or whatever, so I'm not calling to oppose, but I want to point out that we are at the top of a hill, and the wetland in question within this boundary is literally the top of the watershed. So while it looks like just a run-of-the-mill wetland, in fact, anything that occurs in this area will end up going downhill into the rest of the watershed and eventually, I suppose, into the Willamette River. So I just want to make that comment that this is not just, like a wetland that maybe people think, oh yeah, we can just cover it over or pave it and we'll be fine. This is something different. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Acting Council President Wong, I am not seeing anyone else in the virtual audience. I'm not seeing anyone else in the physical audience either.
Okay, and for this, we also allow the applicant, if desired, to rebut opposing testimony. Is there a rebuttal?
Yes, just very briefly, Chris Green again with OTAC for the applicant. The concerns about the wetland buffer and kind of the future planning of this area is, I believe, as staff noted, subject to Washington County's development regulations, also the North Bethany sub-area plan, which looks at future development of that area, different housing needs, open spaces, including identifying and protecting the wetland area that is on part of the property. So in addition to meeting county regulations, Clean Water Services requirements, that area has been identified to be kind of set aside as part of this. And so that is why you see the entire property being annexed, but the development proposal that was shown is located in just one corner of the site.
Thank you. Okay, let's see. So seeing no more testimony, I think the record will remain open. The public hearing continued to May 21st. Is that correct?
That's correct. We recommend that we maintain the record open and the public hearing is continued to May 21st, 2026.
Okay, so we'll have a second reading and council consideration and vote are then scheduled for May 28th, 2026. Thank you, Glenn.
You're
Very
welcome.
thorough.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, our next ordinance is number 26-1544 for the purpose of amending Metro Code Chapter 7.04 to allow allocation of CET funds to technical assistance and to update the CET exemption for affordable housing and declaring an emergency. Councilors, thinking back to our adoptions of the regional housing coordination strategy, Council directed Metro staff to explore using construction excise tax dollars to accelerate housing production. Council also established the Housing Production Accelerator Fund, which would allow for CET funds to be used for grants and technical assistance. The title of today's ordinance has been updated since the original agenda was published to include the emergency clause and to make funds immediately available. Staff are here to describe proposed changes to Metro Code to move forward with these goals. We have with us Hal Hagedorn, Community Investments Manager, and Malou Wilkinson, the Deputy Director of our Planning, Development, and Research Department. Welcome back.
Thank you, and good morning, Acting President Wong, members of the Metro Council. Again, I'm Malou Wilkinson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Deputy Director of Planning, Development, and Research. And we're glad to be here with you this morning with a critical step on the way to implement your guidance from earlier this year that Acting President Wong went over. Next slide, please. So again, we're here today to ask for your consideration of Ordinance 26-1544, which would amend the Metro Code related to the construction excise tax. We have a pretty short presentation and we'll provide you with some context, describe the proposed amendments, and cover our next steps. And with that, I'll turn it over to Hal, and you can go to the next slide.
Great. Good morning, Acting President Huang and councilors. My name is Hal Hagedorn. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Community Investment Manager with the Planning, Development, and Research Department. So I'm here, so this slide talks about the background and context for the construction excise tax. So as you may all know, the construction excise tax has been in place for 20 years, and it imposes a small fee on construction across the region. Since 2006, we have awarded over 100 grants to all 3 counties and 19 cities for planning in the region. The program has evolved over time with multiple updates to reflect the regional priorities. The latest updates that we are looking at are needed to implement the Housing Accelerator Fund as well as the Job Ready Lands program. We are hoping that another important update that we're here to talk about is to align the exemption for affordable housing with state rules, as well as resolution number 5540, which directs the COO to create the Housing Accelerator Fund. Next slide, please. So the code amendments, what we are proposing are two updates. The first is updating the CET exemption for affordable housing developments from 60% of the the average median income to 80% AMI. This will make the Metro Code consistent with the state rules. We are also requesting an amendment to allow distribution of CET funds through technical assistance. Currently, the code allows distribution of funds only through grants to local jurisdictions. Adding the technical assistance will allow flexibility for how dollars can be spent through the Housing Production Accelerator. Next slide, please. So just a short overview of the process. So today, the COO Marisa Madrigal introduced the need for the code and admin rule amendments during the budget process. Today is the first reading. The second reading is scheduled for June 4th. The ordinance is necessary, so because it is an emergency declaration, typically it requires 90 days to be effective, but if approved, it'll be approved June 4th at the second reading. So once the COO approves the administrative rule amendments and the Metro Code is effective, we can then start expending funds at the start of the next fiscal year. And our plan is to have staff in place to stand up the Housing Accelerator in July. So with that, I will hand it back to Malou.
Thank you, Hal. So really can we go to the next slide, please? Really to close, we're here to ask for your consideration of ordinance number 26-1544, which would update the CET exemption for affordable housing developments from 60% of area median income to 80% of AMI, and allow distribution of construction excise tax funds through technical assistance. As Hal said, we're working with COO Madrigal to amend the administrative rules to implement this should you approve this ordinance. And so with that, I think we're happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions?
Yeah.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just one question. What kind of technical assistance are we talking about? I mean, it seems to imply that we can't provide entities, we already provide them certain amounts of technical assistance in plan development and grants like this. So what kind of additional technical assistance would this be?
Yeah, so so technical assistance can come in the form of providing consultants to help local agencies process permits. That is an example. So right now, because of the way the rules are stated, the CET funds can only be distributed through grants. So this allows us more flexibility to offer other types of funding to accelerate housing in the region.
And to add to that, Councilor Rosenthal, just remind you about the elements of the Housing Production Fund, that Housing Accelerator Fund that you all directed us to create. That included, it includes an element of technical assistance that we, upon review of the Metro Code, it did not, it wasn't consistent. So working with OMA, we wanted to be sure that we were able to implement the direction that the council gave us with the Housing Production Accelerator Fund. And that's why we're asking for this small amendment to the code.
Thanks.
Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I am an enthusiastic supporter of us amending our rules in this way. And I have two questions. One, you've already explained that there's an emergency clause so that this can go into effect in alignment with our budget. Can you talk about when you think that the applications will be open so that jurisdictions can actually apply?
So right now, we are trying to staff up for the program. And so we are looking to roll it out sometime this summer. So as quickly as we can, once we are allowed to expend the funds.
And I also just want to add to that, which is we are already starting the conversations with our local jurisdictional partners to be sure that we have we can add to what we learned through the development of the Regional Housing Coordination Strategy, which involved a lot of input from our local partners in terms of the types of the types of work that would be helpful to be part of this program. So we are actually meeting with the City of Milwaukee next week. We are happy to meet with any jurisdiction that is interested in helping us shape this program in a way that is best going to help our jurisdictional partners speed up the production of housing.
Great, thank you. And then my second question is, in the Exhibit A, in the first exemption listed, we're moving from 60% to 80% of AMI for the period of 30 years or more. I think in particular, this program may attract more home ownership than rental, which I think means that the 30-year window, we certainly hope that by having affordable options to build wealth, that over the 30-year period, folks who may start out at 60 or 80% AMI stabilize into 100% AMI. So with home ownership, we don't do the same eligibility checks. Once you own your home, you own your home. What does that mean in terms of this being in code at 80%? The time of sale and then resale restrictions, or are you anticipating any sort of home ownership changes with eligibility?
So this is just for exemption of the CET. So this allows builders who build affordable housing to identify at construction that they are building affordable housing so they don't have to pay the tax. That's what this rule update is aligning to.
Yes, so that then the builder sells to somebody instead of rents to somebody. And so with them making a sale, we expect income to grow, not stay stable, right? So I think we're just putting it out there that, yes, we want the sale eligibility to be at 80% AMI or below. But over the 30-year period, we would not be doing income check.
Nope.
No, Counselor, for the small amount that this tax is and that exemption that is given to incentivize housing at that cost to be built and available for someone who is within that income range when they started, that in and of itself is a benefit. It aligns with the state, and it doesn't really put us in a position to have a long-term requirement that anyone who's in that home is at that income.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, we'll open a public hearing on ordinance number 26-1544. Georgia, for anyone joining us, could you please reread the procedures for providing testimony?
I would love to. If you are testifying on ordinance number 26-1544, now is the time to do so. If you are testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you are testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by using the raise hand function in the reactions or more menus, or by dialing *9. When it is your turn to testify, I'll call on your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist, and you can turn on your camera if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the timer begins when you begin speaking. If you are testifying in person, their timer is located on your testimony table, on the wall, and on the digital screen. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. And Acting Council President Wong, we do have one person who has signed up to testify in advance, and that is Sarah Radcliffe.
Okay, great.
So you can take one of those 2 seats.
Good morning, Acting President Huang, members of council. My name's Sarah Radcliffe, and I'm with Habitat for Humanity Portland Region. I'm just here to thank Metro staff for bringing forward this update to align Metro's construction excise tax program with the state law requirement to exempt CET for houses, homes that are rented or sold below 80% AMI. Most Habitat homes in the Portland metro region are sold to households below 60% of area median income, but for any given development, about a third to a half of the homes could be sold to households up to 80% of area median income. And for the past several years, we've been paying the CET on those 60 to 80% AMI homes, and then going through kind of a laborious process to prove what we paid to the city and then get that reimbursed from Metro. So that's not a great use of our staff time or Metro staff time. And we actually requested to make this change in order to update the program and bring it into compliance with the state law requirement. And then bigger picture, we're just really excited to see Metro moving forward on creative strategies to unlock affordable housing development, even in a time of scarce resources for construction and rising construction costs. So that would be the land banking program, and then using these construction excise tax funds potentially to ready land for housing development. And to your question, Councillor Lewis, about households increasing their income over time and resale restrictions, I'll just mention that for Habitat homes in the Portland metro region, we do use an affordability covenant or deed restriction that lasts for 99 years. So basically the current homeowners agree to pay forward the benefit that they got in the reduced price for their home to the next home buyer. So the resale price of the home is capped, but if those families have their income go up, then great. We're absolutely not checking income over the years. Thank you.
Thank you. Acting Council President Wong, we do not have anyone else who has signed up to testify today.
Seeing no more testimony, we'll close the public hearing. The second reading and consideration of ordinance number 26-1544 is scheduled for June 4th, 2026. Okay, our last ordinance of the day is a second reading and a vote for ordinance number 26-1542 for the purpose of amending Metro Code Section 7.05.150 on deficiencies and refunds to extend tax refund filing deadlines for tax years 2021 and 2022 under certain circumstances. Last week on May 7th, we held a first reading and a public hearing for ordinance number 26-1542. We received no public testimony at that time. Justin Lobsher is back here again to answer any questions we might have. Thanks for sitting through that meeting. Any other questions? Nope. No. Okay. Well, let's. Could I get a motion on ordinance number 26-1542?
I'll move to approve the motion. Acting President Wong.
I'll second. Okay, moved by Councilor Gonzalez, seconded by Councilor Rosenthal. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Councilor Simpson. Councilor Simpson.
Aye. Aye.
Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Aye.
Acting Council President Wong.
Aye. Thank you so much, Justin. Other business, excuse me, we have council discussion of the fiscal year 26-27 approved budget and opportunity for public testimony. Today, Metro Council has additional time for discussion of the approved 26-27 budget. We will also hold our second public hearing on the approved fiscal year 26-27 budget today. On April 30th, Metro Council, acting as the Budget Committee, adopted resolution number 26-5586 to approve the fiscal year 26-27 budget and transmit it to the TSCC. On May 5th, Metro Council held its first public hearing on the approved budget. Council received no testimony at that time. Turning to discussion, Deputy COO Andrew Scott and our Budget Director Sidman Williams are here today to answer questions that councilors may have. Councilors, any questions?
This time.
Really, nothing? Okay, cool. Well, thanks for all your work again. Keeping it easy.
It's good.
Okay, I guess we're moving on. Did you have comments?
No, I didn't have any comments. I
Okay.
just had some stuff in case you wanted to know what the next steps were, that's all.
Sure, what are the next steps?
There's next steps.
Might as well.
Sure, no problem. So for the record, Cinnamon Williams, Budget Director, standing in for Brian Kennedy, the CFO. So our next steps is the TSCC hearing. That's the next official step. We do expect those, they usually submit questions to us, and then we expect them in on Thursday. Then Brian Kennedy will be here and he will disperse them out to staff to get those answers, and those answers will get to you the following Wednesday for the TSCC hearing on Thursday, May 28th. That is scheduled to be at 11 a.m. and it usually goes for 90 minutes, and the TSCC kind of runs that hearing. That's the next official step. And then we do, then we have some, in month of June, we go into adoption mode, and we have approved to adopted changes that Brian Kennedy will be here and we'll have a presentation, and then we adopt the budget on, I should probably look up that actual date, which should be the June 19th.
Okay.
Or June 18th, I'm sorry, June 18th. Those are the next steps.
And I guess in terms of process, if councilors had budget proposed amendments, can you go through that as well?
Sure, absolutely. So we have, your policy advisor should have your forms for any kind of budget amendments and notes. Those are due to myself and Amanda Akers of the Central Budget Office by next Thursday. And let us know there, and we'll help you through that process.
Okay. And while we're here, just a temperature check, do we anticipate budget amendment proposals from many of my colleagues?
I have none this year.
Neither do I.
Okay.
I had an idea for one, but in discussions with staff, we decided that we probably don't need it.
Okay, well, we'll keep it pretty simple this year. Thank you, Sidman.
You're welcome.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, I will now open the public hearing on the approved fiscal year 26-27 budget. Georgia, could you please reread again the procedures for public testimony?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you are testifying on the approved fiscal year 2026-27 budget, now is the time to do so. If you're testifying in person, please sign up by filling out a blue card in the back of the room and bringing it up to me. If you're testifying on Zoom or by phone, please sign up by using the raise hand function in the reactions or more menus, or by dialing *9. When it is your turn to testify, I'll call in your name or phone number. For those on Zoom, click accept to be promoted to a panelist. Your Zoom window will close briefly before you rejoin as a panelist, and you can turn on your camera if you'd like. Testimony is limited to 3 minutes, and the timer begins when you begin speaking. Please state your name for the record before testifying. You do not need to give your physical address. And I'm not seeing anyone in the audience, and there are no hands raised in the virtual audience.
Okay, well, seeing no testimony, I'll close the public hearing. Metro Council will next meet to discuss the approved fiscal year 26-27 budget on May 28th at 11 a.m. This meeting is a public hearing on the budget with the TSCC. And with that, we'll move on to COO Communications with Deputy COO Andrew Scott.
Thank you. President, I'm Deputy Chief Operating Officer Andrew Scott. A couple of updates today. I'm actually going to start with one that I wanted to draw your attention to, an email you received from Kat Kelly on Tuesday of this week. Kat is an economist in Metro's Revenue and Analytics Division. And the email notes that inflation for this last year is running about 3.5% and trending higher, which is not good. But that bad inflation news is not what I wanted to highlight. Instead, I wanted to point out that there's a link in that email to a very cool economic dashboard. And I think, Georgia, you just had that dashboard up, and I just wanted to spend a minute and show you what's there. We've been experimenting with lots of different ways to communicate economic data that might help inform some of your policy discussions, and what you'll see in these monthly emails from CAT are regular discussions of that latest inflation data, as well as a link to a series of charts and summaries of information. And so we'll just scroll really quickly through this. You can see we have obviously inflation data, both for CPI West and the US. If we keep going down, you can also see that we have some employment data for Portland, Oregon, and also national employment data. Keep going. We have industry employment data showing where our growth sectors, or unfortunately some declining sectors, are in the Portland MSA for the last year. Keep scrolling. Housing permits, this is really fascinating county by county data showing housing permits going back almost 15 years, and then a little bit further down are building permits within the Portland MSA, history there. And I think the final one is monthly passengers at Portland International Airport. We're going to continue to adapt how we provide this information to all of you. We'd welcome any feedback or suggestions around these indicators or any new indicators or information you might be interested in seeing. And I also want to thank Council for including in the approved budget a small one-time investment that's going to help us modernize our modeling of the regional economy. So Kat Kelly, Josh Harwood, they're both happy to answer any questions you might have on the data or its policy implications. Feel free to email them, schedule a meeting. Again, we can add things to this, add additional information, but we're just trying lots of different ways to get this information out there, and it's pretty fascinating stuff, and I think can inform a lot of our work. The next thing I want to do is I want to introduce, and I think I'm introducing Liam. I don't see, oh, maybe not. So anyway. I think we have, I thought we were going to have Liam, Evelyn Lieb, and Allison Wicks to talk about Supportive Housing Services, RPOC update, and Housing Bond Oversight Committee, but we may have.
Yesenia.
Yesenia, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
Take it away.
Before Yesenia goes, can I actually ask a question on the economic dashboard?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope I can answer.
I don't know what the right time to bring that up was before Yesenia begins. Sorry, Yesenia.
You're good.
So I think this is really wonderful, and definitely want to continue to just devour all the information that our analytics and revenue division can put together for us. I would love to see a collection of indicators that talk about like how people experience livability and or affordability. So, I mean, is that like wages and affordability index, kind of the price of a median rent, or, you know, median rent to median incomes, like things that can really help us understand. I think that one of the big questions that right now the state, through the governor, is asking with the Prosperity Council is, what does prosperity mean? I think it's a question we should be asking ourselves. What does prosperity mean for people? So I would love for us to find ways to reflect that, maybe through 1, 2, or 3 indicators. But I love the more kind of global, regional looks at permits and things like that. So thank you.
That's great feedback. Thank you. We'll get to work on it.
I'm up. Great.
Thanks, Yesenia.
Good afternoon, Acting Council President Wong and Metro Council. For the record, I'm Yesenia Delgado. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the SHS Division Director in the Housing Department at Metro. And I'm here to provide a brief recap of yesterday's evening SHS Regional Policy and Oversight Committee, or otherwise known as SHS RPOC, meeting that happened yesterday on May 13th. As a reminder, that SHS RPOC serves as a governance committee for the Supportive Housing Services Fund. It is charged with oversight and policy development and serves as an advisory body to Metro Council. During yesterday's evening meeting, members received a high-level overview of the 7-month agenda overview. This was a very brief version of what Council heard during last Tuesday's work session. Our facilitators then discussed group agreements and decision-making processes with the committee. We led an interactive activity for the committee to provide feedback on the regional coordination key performance indicator. As you may remember, the regional coordination KPI was undefined, or TBD, to be determined, and the SHS Reforms Work Plan Metro Council passed last December. We also then heard a very high-level overview from county staff on the county's fiscal year 27 draft annual work plans, and the committee also had a brief opportunity for Q&A with the counties on their work plans. While it was a packed agenda, the meeting marked an important milestone for the committee as only its second convening. And from a staff support perspective, our goals for the meeting included building stronger group cohesion, encouraging honest and transparent dialogue, and introducing and then practicing the modified consensus or 3-2-1 voting approach through a low-stake exercise to approve the April meeting minutes. And overall, the committee made meaningful and productive progress on these goals that we had for them. And before I share a little bit more about what's coming next, I'd like to invite any remarks from the counselors who served on this SHS RPOC committee. So Acting Council President Wong, Committee Chair Councilor Gonzalez, or Councilor Lewis, if there's anything you all would like to add to yesterday's meeting.
Anyone add?
Sometimes I'm amazed that 3 hours doesn't feel like enough. I think that's all. That was a lot. I do. This is kind of more not very update, but more top of mind reflection. Since this meeting was, I feel like 12 hours ago, is I don't feel great about the way the county presentation ended with the work plan. It was kind of a lot of really important questions that I think put our partners in a position of like not even really be able to answer them. So it's just more of a time challenge that we're going to have, trying to bring people along. I just want to put it out there. I don't like that feeling of how it ended. So I'm going to be thinking a lot about our agendas and how we do that in collaboration with you and the housing team and our council here. But aside from that, great work.
Thank you.
I will say I was only able to join for the end as I was breaking ground on affordable housing in my district for the beginning part of the meeting. But when I was able to listen in while driving home and getting home, one of the comments that was made from the county perspective was that the way that Metro is asking questions in our required reports speaks to the program as a startup and capacity building and not where they are now, which is a decision point that they don't want to be adding capacity. And I think that's a really important thing to raise that accusation because the way that we monitor the program is through quarterly and annual reports. We don't have any other tools. And if the counties are bucking the tools that we have agreed on and that we do have through IGA, then I think the trust that we need to build in order to change so we have more dynamic interactions and more dynamic understanding of what's happening at the 3-county level is going to be challenging. So I just want to lift up that I heard that, and that was a bright flashing red beacon of we're not making progress on having the ability to get reports that are real time and what we need.
Thank you. One thing that really stood out was the aggregated fiscal year goals for next year from the counties. And, truthfully, the numbers are modest because I don't think we fully clarified that, those are kind of new and not in addition to, ongoing commitments that have been made. And I just wanted to tease that out more. And I think we're in a really difficult spot because I think Commissioner Snyder said the system is basically full.
Yeah.
And the only way we can keep adding capacity is by managing, inflow and outflow and making sure people are, not needing that system or getting more efficient in what we got. But it was just a really sobering slide because it was like, the other housing placement was like 25 households. And like, why do we even have a line item for 25 household, just in the other category when, that just seemed like a very low amount for its own line sort of thing. So it calls into question for me of like, why do we have that program that seems, I don't know what the underlying housing number represents, but it seems an inefficient program if it's like 25 when the scale we need to be talking about is like hundreds and thousands kind of thing. But yeah, very, very sobering slide. And I think some of our providers said that as well, is like, we're at capacity and, resources federally are shrinking. So the only way is to get more efficient somehow.
Yeah. I can offer a couple perspectives. I completely agree with everything you all have raised. Councilor Gonzalez, on your point around the work plan, We can certainly work to be more intentional with timing on the agendas, to ensure that there's ample time for Q&A. And we will be following up with our county partners to see if they want to provide written responses to those questions. And then we can include that in the meeting packet to ensure that, there's some answers to that information. On the templates, I think that, of course, there's always an opportunity to refine and improve those with the SHS reforms passing, having new goals. We already see that as an opportunity to update our templates and potentially update the local implementation plans as well. But I think for the most part, our current templates are reflective of the requirements that we have set in place, and capacity building is one of the cornerstones of SHS and wanting to build capacity to build a regional system of care, as you mentioned, Councilor Lewis. And absolutely, I think that this was a common theme in terms of the forecasted goals that I've been bringing to you all. 6 years into SHS, there's just less and less capacity for new placements, which is really what that slide was indicated. It's like the new forecasted goals for new placements, new services. We're still sustaining thousands of households, and we can do a better job at outlining those data points and those goals that we're doing. But in terms of supporting new households, we're getting to the place where it's through attrition that we're going to be able to serve new households. And that 25 households that you mentioned, Acting President Juan, under other housing programs, that's just another placement program that we have. So that's a placement program in addition to the rapid rehousing placements, permanent supportive housing. So it's really, you combine all three of those numbers to get our total placement program, which brings us at, a little over 1,000 placements that we're looking at for next year. So I feel like being able to further provide clarity around that number, we can certainly do that with committee members. But yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about what's next. The next SHS RPOC meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, June 10th. And at that meeting, we plan to provide an overview of the Regional Investment Fund and a little bit more about where we're at with the new framework that you all have charged us to work on. Introduce and reintroduce the regional goals previously identified by the formal Tri-County Planning Body. And then we're gonna really spend some time continuing to discuss the SHS reform on updating new SHS goals and KPIs and KEIs, and that will include all of the KPIs, not just specific to the regional coordination one that we spent talking yesterday about. At this stage, we do not anticipate the committee voting on the recommendations. Instead, the focus will remain on refining and defining regional metrics and goals, with the intent to bring forward a set of recommendations in August for Metro Council consideration and potential adoption in September. And then finally, the Housing Department will return here to Metro Council on May 26th to present the SHS third quarter regional program progress, including an overview of several regional goals previously identified by the former Tri-County Planning Body. And that will also be a good time to maybe pick this thread back up on the conversation of how many households are new, how many households are we sustaining, and what are the trends that we are seeing. So this concludes my update for the May SHS RPOC meeting, and I'm around if there are any other questions, but if not.
Yeah, I thought it was a good meeting. I think we spent a lot of time on the group agreements and not enough time on the discussions. I think that probably won't happen again because we've landed the group discussion conversation. But I think just one takeaway for me in terms of our staff facilitation and presentation is, these are public meetings, and we should also use them as opportunities to educate the general public. And I think most of the folks in the room are experts or work in the system, but I think for the general public that watches, when you see slides with those kind of numbers without broader context, people are like, we're spending $500 million a year and we got these numbers, which is not accurate, but having a slide to show kind of the general kind of where the numbers are and not just the new numbers, I think helps set a better tone for someone that might be watching that hasn't been tracking kind of the system over time. So just my bit of feedback for how we tell that story, telling the story during those meetings is really important.
It's a great point. Thank you.
Councilor Rosenthal?
Yeah, I just want to comment. I think this is we've sort of started on a new model. It's a complicated process with the SHS. And we have the committee and these reports back on the committee meetings from yourself as well as from the fellow counselors. I think it's a good thing. It also brings it out in this public forum so that people can listen and understand and get a little broader perspective, and it helps educate people. So I think it's a good thing that we're doing in this regard. It probably isn't going to solve all the problems, but there's still going to be controversies. But I think it's a good start.
Yeah, if I could share one last thing. Thank you, Councilor, for your comments. After our first two meetings, I am feeling this this sense of, I don't know if optimism is the right word, but this theme. And I heard it especially yesterday, last night, during our POC meeting, which is that at least for everyone that spoke up, which was the majority of people, and there were some important people that weren't there and didn't speak up, so I can't say this is the entire committee. But there is an acknowledgement that this measure, one, does important work, two, the system needs major improvements, and three, we need to make those improvements if we want voters to continue to support this measure, which to me feels like a massive regional, to me, it's a success that we're agreeing on those three things, at least foundationally. And it's starting to, the puzzle pieces, I feel like, are starting to come together for us to begin to, one, make those efficiencies, to go after the alignment that we need to. And so I just wanted to share this more of a subjective, like my personal opinion, of a really important theme. And this is across every county, from providers, business community, public sector leaders. And I think that that's worth something. And what are the already immediate values that we're seeing from a new committee that brought people to the table. So I think that that's worth acknowledging.
Really. Thank you.
Great work.
And I
think Housing Bond Oversight Committee.
Yeah, next up, Allison.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Of course.
Good afternoon. We're in the afternoon. Acting Council President Wong and Metro Council. For the record, my name is Allison Wicks. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Affordable Housing Bond Program Supervisor. I'm here today to provide a brief recap on Monday's Affordable Housing Bond Oversight Committee meeting, which happened on May 11th. As a reminder, the Affordable Housing Bond Oversight Committee serves as the governance committee for the Affordable Housing Bond and is charged with oversight of the bond implementation and serves as an advisory body to Metro Council. At Monday's meeting, members received a quarterly report presentation on the Affordable Housing Bond from staff and discussed finalizing findings and recommendations for the committee's 2025 annual report to Metro Council. Members provided feedback to staff and co-chairs on the recommendations, and staff were asked to prepare a second draft of the recommendations for committee members to review and vote on. With the annual report process nearing completion, the committee is next planned to reconvene in September. And in the meantime, committee co-chairs Andrea Sanchez and Jeff Petrillo will present to the committee's annual report to Metro Council on June 30th, along with Housing Department staff. And that concludes my update on the Affordable Housing Bond Oversight Committee. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Nope. Thank you, Allison.
Okay.
Okay, Councilor Communications. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much, colleagues. Yesterday was a really exciting day for the Affordable Housing Bond Program. Many of us nearly blew away in a very cold, windstormy type environment. But we were able to cut the ribbon and celebrate the opening of 270 some units of affordable housing at the Hillside Park Phase 1. Hillside Park is really lovely in that it is reinvestment of land that has long been held by the Housing Authority of Clackamas County in Milwaukee. Some old, like, post-war cottages had been there for decades. And now 3 beautiful new buildings opened up, really well situated. So it was recipient of housing bond, but also TOD. And then in the afternoon, it had slightly calmed down with the wind, but it was still a strange weather environment as we gathered for the groundbreaking of Jamie Court on Southwest Barber, and that is a really exciting project. It is one of the land banked parcels, so we were able, as Metro, to identify that site as an important neighborhood, an important transportation corridor, and a great opportunity. And you know what, it's a groundbreaking, but they're already hard at work. Foundation's already there. There were pipes, there were pieces of metal everywhere, so that construction is underway. Really exciting for the developers of Jamie Court. And then last, I just wanted to celebrate the work of the Oregon Zoo in head starting northwestern pond turtles. These are endangered species that are extremely threatened, particularly by the invasive bullfrog that likes to eat them. So part of head starting them for a year at the zoo means after 1 year of getting really good nutrition, they are like the size of a 3-year-old when they're just 1. So when they're released back into nature, hopefully they don't get eaten. And I was able to help release 22 of them on Tuesday. And the zoo and conservation partners did a really nice job. And cheers to the Oregon Zoo for being part of that effort alongside state agencies and conservation partners.
Councilor Rosenthal. Thanks. 2 short items. One on housing. I think it's great that we opened a bunch yesterday. I wanted to attend, but had some automobile problems. TOD met this week, and they have about $2.5 million coming forward, but they only have 3 projects, or they currently have 3 projects that are in the pipeline to be considered and move forward. So that's continuing to move forward on transportation-oriented development. It's a small portion of the grants, but it's important. And then I wanted to report briefly on the WEA had a meeting on economic development this morning, attended particularly by 2 education champions, Senate President Rob Wagner and then Representative Sue Reike-Smith, both of whom have quite extensive education chops. And they were talking about economic development, of course, mentioned the work that WEA has done and our response to that. But one of the issues that came up was workforce development and the somewhat fragmented technical career pathways program that we have in the state that's not very well coordinated. And the only reason I mention that is that both of representatives mentioned that Metro may have a role in convening and bringing this forward in a more productive way in the future as we move forward with economic development.
Thanks for the update. Okay, saying no further discussion, the council meeting is adjourned. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for May 19th, 2026 at 10:30 a.m. But colleagues, council will meet in executive session prior to that meeting at 9 a.m. pursuant to ORS 192.6602H to consult with counsel regarding the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. And that statute also allows us to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection.